Hi, Cedric and Bree.
Alicia, how are you doing?
Great, great. Bree, all right, we are cooking with bacon now. This is great. So let me just say welcome to you, Bree. Welcome to you, Cedric.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
You too. You're welcome. This is before I get started, we're gonna jump right in. We have already received questions. We're already receiving questions, so I want to make sure that we get to all of them. You are two of our favorite folks to feature, and this is an inspiring series. And this, and particularly what we're going to talk about today, real estate, is something that's on the mind of so many people. Let me just frame out what we're going to do this afternoon, and then launch right into our discussion. So this is our fifth installment of the Entrepreneurship Matters series. It really is a conversation between a local up and coming and an established entrepreneur. What we know is that successful entrepreneurs and successful businesses are not built in a day. It takes undiluted passion, multiple failures, lots of grit, and long-term commitment to make it work. And we have two of Baltimore's finest that are working and investing in our community, and their stories are powerful. So let me introduce you both, but I won't give all of the secret sauce of who you are before we launch into the discussion, but I need to set you up right. So first, I want to introduce Bree Jones. Bree is the founder of Parity Homes, an equitable development company that acquires and rehabilitates abandoned properties by the block to create affordable home ownership opportunities. She wants, at the core of her work, is to develop without displacement. And she aims to revitalize distressed neighborhoods while ensuring that legacy residents are able to participate in and benefit from reinvestment. Bree is, although Bree, you have done a lot, you are running fast, extremely fast. You have had an amazing career in finance and investments. You've been an analyst at Morgan Stanley, a vice president of a hedge fund, Point72 Asset Management, and an investment associate at venture capital firm Antithesis Group. You have been a lifelong social justice advocate. And we're going to talk a little bit about how your activism is through real estate development, which I think is amazing. Cedric, great. Look at the family. The young man, it's always good to see the family on this. This is good. This is good. Cedric Bobo is the CEO and co-founder of Project Destin, born and raised in Mississippi, but is claimed by many different cities across the country, including Baltimore. He is the co-founder of Project Destin, a social impact vehicle that trains urban youth and military veterans to be owners and stakeholders in communities in which they live, work, and play. Prior to founding Project Destin, Cedric, when I first met you, you didn't tell me your whole story, because Cedric was named one of the top 10 powerful Black people on Wall Street. He spent over 10 years at the Carlyle Group, where he committed over $2 billion of equity capital. He is a graduate of Harvard Business School and University of Tennessee, and more importantly, just an asset in our community. So I really welcome both of you to this series. And I think this is going to be one of the most inspiring conversations we've ever had. So why don't we just launch in? So both of you are in real estate. Both of you have quite an extensive investment background. Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to leave the Carlyle Group, leave hedge fund, and go into investment into real estate? Want to start with Bree?
Sure. I was hoping you would pun that over to Cedric, but I'll take it.
Oh, you should have told me. You should have sent me a smoke signal. I would have done it. I would have done it.
It's all good. You set the bar really high, but it's all good. So yeah, I got into real estate. Actually, it was totally unplanned, and it really was as a response to gentrification that I was experiencing in my community. So I'm from New York, originally from the Bronx. And then my mom moved us out to the county, so New Rochelle. But right now, that area, and really for the last 6 to 7 years, has been undergoing a lot of gentrification. And so I kind of got started really as an activist and just trying to call for equitable development, call for, hiring of locals at living wages, hiring formerly incarcerated people, affordable housing, all the things. And it was just very, very difficult to kind of disrupt speculative and extractive development in our Black community. And so I felt that I might have a little bit more leverage and more impact by becoming a developer and just having those core principles built into the company, rather than trying to influence, existing developers from, the community perspective. And both are important, but I guess I just felt led to start my business around those principles.
No, that's really important. And I think we're going to come back to this form of using activism as a part of your business, because Cedric, in many ways, is just like you. Cedric, what inspired you? Very, very successful career in investment banking and financial services. What transitioned you over to real estate development?
I mean, I think from the very beginning, I always just wanted to be an owner. I mean, that was just a title that I wanted to have next to my name. And so for me, my mom had two areas of focus. One was education, the other was ownership. And I think she saw it in her grandfather, who was a landowner in Mississippi during a very turbulent time, but he owned real estate. And I think he had a certain sort of commitment to his community because he was an owner. He didn't feel like a victim. And I think as I was growing up, there was always this aspiration to obviously own a home, but really to have more impact on creating owners in your community. And so, I had a great career at Carlisle, and I'm so grateful to them because so much of what I do today is on the backs of what I learned there. But ultimately, I wanted to build something on my own. And so after a long time investing for others, I started Project Destin, and we started in Detroit because I just saw it as a place like, wow, Detroit has had so many challenges, but now there's a ton of new development, and old Detroit is not really as involved as hopefully they can be over time in development. And so we started there, but it was the same theme from the time I was 8, which is I wanted to be an owner, and I want to help support more folks in becoming owners in their communities.
Let's take it step by step, because there are a number of people, and I know there are a number who were saying they were going to join today, have the same principles that both you and Bree talked about, right? One, ownership within community. Two, how do you allow for people who live there that may be renting or maybe may see things being bought around them? How do you get involved in that? So let's take it real granular.
Yeah.
So how do you get started in real estate? Why don't we start with you, Cedric? See, Bree, see how I learned? Look at you. Look.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. How do you go step by step?
Yeah.
You go from the Carlisle group, and then you're starting, say, I'm going to go and help individuals in my community. I'm going to become an owner. I'm going to help others in my community. What were the steps you went through?
I mean, for me, it was the first piece was knowledge acquisition. I mean, I think that the idea of wanting to do something, you first got to collect facts on how to do it. And then for me, it was building a network and then building a capital base. And so, I started in 2005 with my wife in London, and we bought a flat or an apartment, and then we bought another one. And so for us, we were in a city that we thought had great potential. So we started making micro investments, small equity investments in real estate. And then over time, we built up sort of greater knowledge, but also a greater network that made it easier to execute. So again, going super granular, we bought a flat in 2005 in London. I got a 99% mortgage. So I think I wrote a check for $2,500, 2,500 pounds. And we bought our first flat. A year later, we had moved to London, but we didn't sell that flat. We just rented it out. And then we just kept on that same formula. I would earn a carried interest check from Carlisle, look at my wife, and we would go buy another flat in London. And so bit by bit, we were building knowledge, and then we were practicing. So by the time I got to Detroit, I had great comfort in our ability to, one, buy things and improve them, but also I had a network of folks who could help me perform due diligence, think about acquiring capital. So it wasn't an overnight success. It was really bit by bit. I was always acquiring knowledge, relationships, and capital.
Mm-hmm. Now what you just said, I think I want to pull out and make sure I know many people are taking notes. And so I want to just lift up 4 things that I heard you say. One, it was essential for you to acquire knowledge, to understand, just the basics of what you were doing. Second, you talked about building capital. Third, I never heard this, building the network around you, especially in the real estate field. Like that's interesting. You talked about that. And the fourth, starting with the small investment and then building over time. So really, taking yourself, you started with one flat apartment, right? Just for everybody that's not from London, right?
Yeah.
It's like a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment.
Exactly.
And then turning that into a rental income, and then buying the next one and buying the next one.
And Alicia, the other point I would make is that I made a bet on myself first. I didn't ask anyone to come into those first few deals. I did really small deals when skin was in the game. So when I went to someone else and I said, I want to raise capital, they could look at a track record where my money went in first. I don't ever ask anyone to make a bet on me that I have made on myself.
Well, now that will preach a whole word, betting on yourself first, and talking about, so your 4th deal was the first one when you invited someone to come in and bet alongside you.
I got rid of the mistakes. I mean, I want to get the mistakes out of the way on my dime, and then I want to scale it with other folks' capital. So they can look at it. And frankly, it's slightly selfish. I will get better capital. I will get cheaper capital if I wait and I have a track record.
It's so important. How about you, Bree? How did you, step by step, and I would never ask a woman, but how old are you, Bree? Because I think it's important for people to understand how impressive you are at this. I mean, Cedric, you're very young.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm 29, but I feel old. I'm going to be 30 in like a few months. So,
yeah. We're not even talking about that. So how did you, 29, not even 30, building your business? Can you talk about how you got into step by step, went from an investment firm into a real estate company?
Yeah. So I bought my first property at 26, but I had known, I think, for several years that I wanted to. And so really the first step was hardcore savings. I was saving, my paycheck each month. And this is when I was still working in corporate America. Also, I lived at home. I lived with my mom, so I wasn't paying, rent. I was keeping my expenses down, and I was able to save. So I saved for about 4 or 5 years. And then I, started to look, and I gave myself probably a year of like actively looking on the market, looking on MLS at different homes. And at first I thought, it would just be my home that I lived in. But as I saw that gentrification was really impacting my community, I decided that I wanted to convert the property into affordable housing for working class folks so that I can maintain some affordable housing stock in the neighborhood. So, at first I looked in New Rochelle, which is my hometown, but New Rochelle is, an expensive market. And so I looked at the next town over, which is Mount Vernon. And if folks know a bit about, New York, I think Mount Vernon is a beautiful city and a beautiful community, but there would be some people who would have, disparaging remarks about Mount Vernon or about the Bronx. I could see past that. So I purchased my first property at a deep discount in Mount Vernon, and I converted it into a 3-unit, deeply affordable building. So I guess my first tip would be to maybe be courageous and looking past, like what markets are hot, because if you're looking at markets that are hot, you're going to be paying a premium for it. If you look at markets that are, disregarded, which oftentimes is rooted in, racism and the disparaging of Black and Brown communities, you'll actually see that your dollar goes further in those communities. You're getting a bigger bang for your buck, and you have deeper impact in those places. Then I used, you know, a 3.5% first-time home buyer mortgage, which I really urge everyone who's looking to purchase their first home to tap into that 3.5% program. And I did what's called house hacking, in which, you know, you use that really low-cost mortgage to get a multi-unit property. So it doesn't have to be a single family. You can get a property up to 3 units. And there are other programs like the 203K loan, which allows you to roll in construction costs to, you know, the purchase price. And then there's also a program called NACA, which I didn't use, but that allows you to get, I think, like a 0% mortgage, or just something like really, really affordable. And I guess the last tip that I would offer up is, if you are going to kind of get into development, I highly urge that you find a mentor, because there were so many mistakes that I made just because I didn't know. And I had done a ton of research beforehand, but it's like, you just don't know until you need to know it. And in hindsight, I wish that my 29-year-old self was mentoring my 26-year-old self, because I would have told myself like all the things that you need to watch out for. So definitely get a mentor. Mm-hmm.
That is, so a couple of things I heard you say. One, you bought your first property at 26, amazing. The second is that you saved, paycheck to paycheck, lived at home, cut expenses for 4 to 5 years. So this was a long-term sort of initiative. You then utilize different tools that allow for you to actually access. You talked about the first-time home owner credit. The second one was the tool that allowed for you to roll your construction costs into your mortgage. Can you say that again so people can take that down?
Yeah, that's 203K. 203K.
Yeah. And then NACA, which you didn't avail yourself of, but was a tool that you want. Let's launch into the next part of this. And Bree, I think you gave us a good bridge into that. Cedric, I know you're all of 31. So this is a good both up and coming folks. Can you tell us about what you would have told yourself starting out, right? Surely you've learned lessons, things that you would have done differently had you known them then. What are some of those lessons that you would want, your 29-year-old self, your 26-year-old self to know, as if someone's on here thinking about entering into the real estate field?
The first is, I think you always wish you would have started earlier. And so I think there's, I spent 17 years buying companies. Part of my career, I bought real estate on the side. If I could have started earlier, I would have started buying multifamily properties when I was 22. I think the great thing about buying multifamily, especially when you're buying affordable assets, is that those things are likely going to be close to 100% occupied as long as you operate them effectively. So the risk is really overpaying, but operationally, if you're a good operator, you'll find tenants. So I would have bought multifamily earlier, because I just think one of the greatest businesses on this planet is the idea of buying and providing shelter. And so I would have just done that much earlier in my career, and I would have probably heeded the suggestion of really learn how to just basically manage fear earlier, right? Like, don't be afraid to be afraid. And so I would have probably exercised that at just a much earlier age. One of the best things about real estate, I tell folks all the time, is that, in the world, there are two kinds of debt. There's recourse debt and there's non-recourse debt. And I call recourse debt, celebrity and entertainer debt. Everything they buy against their name. Versus professional investors, when they buy things, they use non-recourse debt, and it's all tied to the company. And one of the great things about real estate is if you buy an asset that's largely occupied, you can get non-recourse debt. And I just think earlier on, I would have exercised some wisdom and just start buying assets early, using non-recourse debt and building up a portfolio. I do that now, but I wish I would have started early, because I would have 15,000 assets.
Now I'm going to go a little deeper with you on that, because someone's on here saying, what is non-recourse debt? Like, how would you get access to that?
Yeah. So just think about non-recourse debt is just, it's tied to the physical asset. When you go and
Sure.
you go and you buy a home, the source of income is you, right? I mean, you earn income, you pay off the mortgage. Non-recourse debt is really tied to the physical asset. An apartment building has tenants who pay their rent. They generate the revenue, you pay off your expenses. The rest is profit that then services the loan. So non-recourse debt that says, hey, I don't care about Cedric other than him putting some money in. What I really care about is the quality of the building and the fact that the tenants pay their rent. That's my real recourse. I'm going to them when there are problems. And so if I would have known about non-recourse debt earlier in life, I would have set my sights on buying much more multifamily, because you have a chance to, one, use debt in a really smart and powerful way. And the other piece is that you're providing shelter in communities. And if you want to change how communities evolve, become an owner, right? Don't do it from the sidelines. Become an owner and an activist, to where you can actually activate in the community through what you own. The best way for people to follow your lead is for you to actually do it, not just talk about it. And so I would have done that much earlier in my career. And again, that's just knowledge acquisition, right? I would have done that and everything else, I would probably do the same, but I would have probably bought more apartments when I was younger.
It's good point. Good points. And helping people to understand the difference between the different debt. Did you really, people don't know that there is some good debt. It's not all bad.
Debt is an incredibly amazing tool. The thing that people make a mistake on is that they go out and they borrow debt tied to their name. And I don't advise anyone to take on debt tied. If someone says the word recourse debt to me tied to my name, I don't even speak to them anymore. It's just something I would never do. I only focus on non-recourse debt that's tied to a building. And I tell students all the time, I've never bought a building and had a credit check. They don't care about my credit. They just care about whether the building's tenants pay their rent. And so I just want more young people to understand that debt is a powerful and a wonderful tool. Don't be confused by financial literacy telling you to be afraid of it. Understand it and then use it for your good.
Very, very good point, in the sense that there's certain type of debt, coming after your assets. And if there's other type of debt where they're coming after the asset. Exactly. Securing the debt. That's such an important point. You should give a lesson. Cedric, we're going to bring you back. You're going to give a lesson in debt.
It's the most. So when I go into high schools, I always tell students, I mean, outside of my faith and my family and a few other things, like, debt is the most wonderful, important thing in my life, because most of the wealth in our country has been created out of the smart use of debt. Right. And we should never allow financial literacy to confuse our children. There is your personal debt, and you got to be very careful there. But when it comes to business debt, non-recourse debt that supports you in acquiring assets is an incredibly important tool for you to build wealth. Yeah.
Excellent. Bree, how about you? How would you, you're 29, so you said talking to your 26-year-old self or 22-year-old self, what would you say to her?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it and I was like, 3 years is not really enough time for me to give like big life lessons. There's a lot of like small tactical things where I was like, sure. And I should have done that differently. But in hindsight, aside from the small things, like I said, that I just didn't know and I had to learn the hard way, I think I'm really I'm happy with the way that my adult life has been going. Like I worked, in the professional and corporate America. I saved. I was able to acquire an asset that's actually helping me be an entrepreneur, because it's bringing in a little bit of income each month. So I don't have to worry about immediately, netting revenue in my entrepreneurial business. I kind of similar to what Cedric said earlier, I used my own capital, and I kind of got all the mistakes out the way, which is kind of helping me raise a larger round of capital from institutional investors. But I think maybe what I would say to my younger self is follow your intuition, listen to your inner compass, be audacious, dream big, go for it. Quitting my job was, I mulled over it for a long time. Like, am I crazy? What am I doing? Like, this is so risky. I'm throwing away like this finance degree, you know, or not throwing it away, but like the safety that it provides. And I just threw myself into what is a very unsure and uncertain place. But even through all the like difficulties of that, I still feel really happy that I did. So yeah, I think maybe that would be what I would say to my younger self.
That's a good question. Let me segue into something both of you talked about, which is activism. You both view real estate development as a form of activism. And I think your work bears that out. Cedric, why don't you talk a little bit and go deeper on Project Destin? Because I met you from a friend in LA who told me about Cedric and like what he's doing with kids, who's in Baltimore, and that's how we got connected. Talk a little bit about Project Destin, because I think your form of activism and how you've been doing it is quite impressive. And how do you turn your passion into a purpose that's bigger than yourself? So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so first, I mean, like, I got really lucky in that I had a tremendous professional career in private equity. That is the foundation of all the work that I do. I mean, I've decided to spend the rest of my career, doing two things. One, investing capital in real estate, and then simultaneously creating an experiential education platform. And that's what Project Destin is. We go into cities around the country and we do two things. We try and find deals to invest in, and we simultaneously work with high schools, colleges, military veterans to train folks how to become owners. And that's the simple mission. Now, how we execute it is when we put students through an experience of looking at a live deal in their community. So an example would be coming to Baltimore. We partner with Dunbar High School. We take on 30 students and we train them in every aspect of real estate. How do you source a deal, finance a deal, construction design, and they do it while looking at a live deal with us in their community. So if we have students from Baltimore, we're looking at East Baltimore deals. If they're from LA, it's South LA deals. But the key for us is it's always real deals, and we take them through the full experience, and they put together investment memos where they're presenting live deals. It's both a source of insight for me, but also it's a confidence builder for them, because to me, one of the biggest limitations in real estate is the acquisition of language and professional and academic confidence. And so in putting together an investment memo and you go through it with a deal that you can walk and go and see, you begin to build this knowledge and you build a pattern. And so to me, so much of life is pattern recognition. After you've gone through the pattern of looking at a deal using potentially my capital, when you go and do it for yourself, you've got much greater confidence in doing it. So we put you through a rigorous experience of doing it, because I'm pretty careful with my dollars. And so if you look at something for me, you look at something for anybody, and most importantly for yourself. And so we put you that experience, and then we put you in front of investors where you present that deal in a Shark Tank style format. So the lights are on, it's a competition, you earn stipends, but most importantly, you learn how to become an investor in your neighborhood, and you switch from this idea of people are doing things to me to where here's what I'm going to do in my neighborhood to make sure I'm a participant in the change.
Yeah, no, and I've met your young men and women, impressive young people from Baltimore who talk about real estate like 20-year vets. I mean, they just walk with a different level of confidence. And I mean, I think that's powerful to see young people thinking about ownership in their communities at that age. Bree, how about you? You talk about activism. It's based on your activism. Can you talk us through what do you mean by that, and how are you see resonance?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This is a good pairing with Cedric and I, because
I know what I'm doing. We put it
you sure do
together. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because I mean, for me, like, I got started in real estate development because I felt like my community back in New York was kind of being taken away from me, and I didn't have, and taken away from the folks who live there. I didn't have the language or the skill set to, stop it or to try to do something that benefited us. And so I wish that Cedric, had set up something in New Rochelle when I was, 15, because things probably would have been a lot different. And so I for me, in terms of activism, it's about being a proactive developer in communities that have otherwise been disregarded, and that either face kind of two trajectories. Either they stay disregarded and disinvested and continue to suffer from the historic ramifications of redlining and race-based disinvestment, or, you know, an outside developer comes in, they, you know, put a bunch of money in, but it's not for the people who live in that neighborhood. And so that tends to be the two choices for Black and brown communities. I think activism in real estate is around instilling or empowering or creating agency for legacy residents to be the determinants of, you know, their neighborhood's outcomes. And I think, you know, Cedric is doing that through teaching high school kids. I'm doing it kind of like as a developer, but bringing community along in that process through equitable development. So yeah, that's what activism looks like for me. And it's also about creating ownership. So Parity, for example, we are selling all of the homes that we renovate, because ownership creates wealth, and ownership ensures that, you know, as the neighborhood continues to evolve and grow, you're planted firmly, you know, in your community. You're not going to be pushed out because your landlord decides to triple your rent.
Alicia, the one point I would add to what Bree is saying is that I think, you know, the key is scaling this. I mean, it's, you know, training 10 folks to become owners. I mean, it doesn't change the environment today, or the diversity in commercial real estate, and certainly the diversity of owners in commercial real estate. And so in our mind, the point Bree made about being a 15-year-old in New Rochelle is that we sort of take an inspiration from the NBA, which is that they put a basketball in a kid's hand from the time they're 5. And so in our mind, we should be putting real estate in a kid's hand from the time they're 5th or 6th grade. So your middle school students near John Hopkins, they should be taking a version of our course, because if we don't put the ball in their hand early with regard to real estate, they don't see themselves as participants in the change. And we don't reach them where they are before they have major decision points. And so I think a lot about scale today. And the reason why I partner with folks from Brookfield, or I have a competition tomorrow, and I have judges from Greystar, the largest owner of multifamily in the country, is because imagine if I could create an environment where I may set up the infrastructure, but my teachers are the best and brightest in owning in real estate. And they're now teaching my children from the time they're 6th grade. Now what happens is those students wake up and they're like, you know what? I know someone at Greystar. I know someone at Brookfield. Yeah, they're moving into my town, but I can reach out to a Rick Clark, because you got to get them in the room where it happens so they can begin learning, and then learning the tricks of the trade so they can then become owners in a scaled way.
No, I mean, that quote from Hamilton you just used, you thought I didn't know that, didn't you? You thought I missed that. No, but couple of points you just made, which I think you and Bree just made, that is instructive for those of us who are sitting within institutions and who are understand how much knowledge we have that is so powerful. If you got that into the hands of people before they had to make other critical decisions, what outcomes could we drive, right? And then the second point is this power of the network. That's actually been a theme. You know, this is our 5th installment. That's been a theme we've seen come back time and time and time again. And so we're going to dig deep in that, but we're also going to get to some of these questions in the poll, because we have a lot coming in. I'm guessing people are really tuned in. Let me mention one thing before I start launching into some of those questions. If you are with us on the phone, or if you're with us on Facebook and you don't want to put it in the Facebook chat, you can text your questions to the number 22333 and type JHUWL in the message, and then proceed with typing your question, and I will receive those and be able to ask Bree and Cedric those questions. Why don't we get to one of my final questions, which then is the segue into the great deal of questions that we received in the chat. What's your vision? So what's your vision for where this is going? Like where if there were no limits, if there was Jeff Bezos was on here, if someone else, Oprah's listening in. I always talk about Oprah. I love Oprah. If they were listening in and they said, what was the vision that I could invest in? What's the vision? What's the vision that you have for where you're going and what you're doing and the impact you're having? Bree, because
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Okay, all right, you take it, and then I'm going to Cedric. All right.
Yeah. So in the short to medium term, Parity is looking to do 96 abandoned buildings in West Baltimore to acquire, renovate, and then sell affordably. So that's like 3 to 5 years out. But I think big picture, I love to like ask folks, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? And where I really see like what I would hope for Parity, one is that we would be able to actually go to other cities like Detroit, St. Louis, Chicago, New Orleans, because all of those cities are, you know, struggling with similar issues, the disinvestment of Black and Brown communities. And I would love if there were community groups already on the ground there that would just like, you know, someone with some housing expertise to come in and help them kind of fulfill their housing goals for their community. And that way Parity would be able to scale or to expand. But also I hope that even if that weren't the case, that just anyone out there nationwide who is feeling like they want to be proactive developers in their community before they need to be faced with a critical decision-making point, that they take development into their own hands and they reinvest in neighborhoods that have been kind of overlooked and forgotten, and they see the inherent value and they, you know, revitalize it just based off of the fact that they see the value and they bring folks in. So I think that would be my hope, is that we kind of disrupt this pattern of gentrification and speculation, and people who live in their community feel like they're empowered enough to do development on their own behalf.
Excellent. And 96 homes. It's 96 family units in West Baltimore. Mm-hmm. Significant. Yep. Significant. Cedric, how about you?
Oh, that's fantastic. And I mean, so there's two elements to what we plan to do. And I mean, the first is, you know, we're going to provide training in every gateway city in the world. And so over the next 5 years, we'll do that. And it really starts with the same formula. We start early with students. We train them to be owners, and we're going to do it at scale around the world. The second piece is that we start with education, but then we follow on with investment. So in almost all of our cities, we also work to invest capital largely around multifamily, and we'll do that. But the first for us is getting in with education. It helps us build a really strong local network with some amazing partners, and then we follow with building housing. So we'll follow that formula over the course of the next 5 years. And I would be disappointed if students weren't taking it everywhere from Lagos to Hong Kong to London to all parts of the US. Wow. Because I think, frankly, COVID has actually made it easier for us to grow. We started doing virtual training last year when we launched LA and London simultaneously, but it was still seen as kind of second best to do the work virtually. Well, now it's no longer second best, it's required. So frankly, we trained 500 students in our first 3 years. We'll probably train 1,000 this year alone, because again, virtual is now acceptable. And so I see this next 5 years as a chance for us to really ramp up and scale. And I've always wanted to build a brand that actually grew, whether crisis or not crisis. And so it gives us a chance to prove out that, you know, what we're building is crisis agnostic. Education in terms of ownership is always in vogue.
That's a good point. Crisis agnostic work, because a lot of businesses are not crisis agnostic, and you got ahead of the curve. Let me ask a couple of the questions that have been posed. Received one that came in from text from an individual that has land, commercial property, and residential property that has been deeded to them. So, but they need to do something. Totally clueless about what to do. Who should they talk to? What would be your best next steps for them, so that one, they don't get taken advantage of, but also just understand the asset that they have and what they might be able to do with it?
Bree, you want me to take it or do you like to take it? Yeah.
We could both share our thoughts. I was gonna say maybe you should try to find a development consultant. There are folks that do advisory around development projects. Maybe just try to get an hour or two of their time, and they can kind of point you in the right direction and how to think about this tactically, and also share their qualifications, whether or not you would like to retain them. And the reason I say kind of lean towards the consultant is because many times I've seen folks where real estate development is, not your profession, but folks try to become real estate developers. And like I said, like when I did it the first time, there were so many things I learned the hard way. So I really do think that hiring someone to help you develop those properties, or at least figure out what to do with them, would be what I would do if I were in your position.
Somebody just talked about Charm City Buyers. This is not a commercial for Charm City Buyers, but someone in the chat, just full disclosure, just said Charm City Buyers is a great consultant within Baltimore City. Cedric, what would you say? What advice would you give?
I think first you got to start. I always start with, you got to acquire some knowledge on your own, so you can actually have a thoughtful conversation. So whether you go on a Project Destin and take our course, or you take some course just to understand the foundation of real estate. And what I would tell you is that real estate is all about cash flow. Don't let anyone mistake. It's not about what you build. It's about whether what you build produces cash flow. And the challenge of land is that land is a cash sink, right? It doesn't produce any cash flow, and you probably pay taxes on it. And so you got to figure out what are the potential uses of that land. And so whether it's a development consultant or just finding a friend who's an architect and just having him do some research on what you can actually build there. Is it residential? Is it commercial? Like, what can you actually do there? After doing what you can do, finding a set of people that can help you execute. But the path is to cash flow. It's not a nonprofit, right? You got to figure out what can you build to produce cash flow. And if you can't produce cash flow from it, you need to find someone who can either sell it to them or partner with them. But to me, don't get lost in the idea of just owning something is where the value is created. You got to make something of it that produces cash flow. And you got to acquire that knowledge first, and then have some partners help you actually go out and execute.
Yeah, good points. Let me ask this next question. This person is being very open in asking this question. Where you talked about, both of you went through steps of knowledge acquisition and then building capital, and Cedric, you stress really knowledge acquisition as you talk about developing a real estate business. This person is asking, how should I understand the allocation of my time when it comes to building this business? So, I'm acquiring knowledge, and, I want to value time versus time dedicated to seeking, to really trying to figure out where are deals, looking at assets and things of that. So how would you say, they should be bifurcating there or chopping up their time?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would do is you got to put together a plan. Your plan could be half a page, 1 page, 20 pages, but I think you got to put together a plan and understand what are the targeted outcomes, and then what are the steps to get you there. Because once you put together the plan of the target outcomes, and by the way, the plan doesn't mean you got to 100% achieve it, but you got to have a map if you're going somewhere. So I would put together the planned outcomes, right? And then the steps that I hope would help get me there. And more than likely, those steps are going to be weighted. Some are more important than others. And that weighting should probably guide how you spend your time. I would say when you put that plan together, what should become obvious is that you can't do it alone, and you probably need some partners along the way. So I think a misstep some people make is the idea that to achieve all 3 of these items, I've got to do it myself. Part of putting the steps together is that you want to sort of acquire the network and training required to achieve it. But start with that plan, understand the 3 to 4 steps, and then allocate your time based upon what's important, not what takes the most time, right? There's some steps that you should not be involved in, right? So you want to make sure, establish the goals, put together the steps, allocate your time based upon importance, not time requirement. And then just get going and don't sleep until you're satisfied with the results.
Yeah, no, excellent. Really allocate based on importance, is critical for all of us, because time is the one asset we don't get back. What would you say? What would you have anything to add? Or
Yeah, I think this is not going to be, sexy, but I don't look at this as like a get rich quick thing. It's going to take time. And I would actually say that maybe time is a little bit your friend, because sometimes when you rush into things is when you put yourself at the most risk of losing all the stuff that you worked for. So, I mean, I spent 4 to 5 years saving. And during that time I was reading and I was learning, and I still it still really beat me up, when I got my first property, because there's just a lot of things I still didn't know. So again, reiterating, getting a mentor. And then once I decided to start Parity, it actually just took me 2 years, again, learning Baltimore's market, learning how to make affordable homeownership work in terms of the capital stack, meeting community groups, building trust with community groups, meeting my, elected officials from the council level to the state level, meeting local government, meeting investors and debt providers, and vetting my general contractor and my attorney and my accountant and my engineers and my architect. All of that took a lot of time. And, when I was a year in, I was like, I just want this to happen. And now a year later, I'm like, if I had started a year before, I would have been wholly unprepared. And so knowledge in real estate really is going to be your best friend. And if you can not only partner on deals, because when you partner, the implication is that, you have something to bring to the table, but you can also just try to learn from other people's projects. Ask if you can shadow other projects that are in the works, just so that you can, be a fly on the wall and just learn from other people's mistakes. Another thing that you could do is try working for a development company for a few years, interning. So yeah, I would say be really cautious, because real estate is a very easy way to lose money. And, especially if it's your money, it's even more painful. So try to make mistakes on other people's dimes, like Cedric has, brought up. Or, well, he said make mistakes on your dime, which that's also true. But if you can, just try to protect yourself as much as you can. And you're going to do that through learning.
It's interesting. First of all, I want to tell you, we've gotten probably a good dozen comments, which I thought were questions, but they were just saying how proud they are of both of you, how much they appreciate you being in our community, how much we value what you're doing. So that I wanted to give you that, because it's always good for people to give you your flowers. So let me ask you this. Got another question. How can someone get involved in what you're doing, right? So Cedric and Bree, how can folks who are, living in Baltimore or maybe living in another city, how can they get involved in the work you're doing? Sure. Oh yeah, somebody said, yeah, how do we support? How do we make sure you can keep doing what you right now? And somebody said, right now, how do we support? Okay, so all right. Bree, you're gonna have a list, so I want to let you get a list down, because you're 29, so I want you to have the longest list. Bree, Cedric, why don't you get started, and then we'll go to Bree.
Yeah, I would say you go to our website, projectessence.com, and there's a chance to become a partner, or if you're a student, to take a class. For us, in so many ways, we're an education company. And so we have really two elements to it. You can become a partner where you're helping, fund students take our course, or you're a student and you're taking the course. Those are the two really strong ways to get involved in the work. And we'd love to have more participants be engaged in Baltimore. I think it's going to be one of our most powerful markets, a big part because of folks like Alicia. And we'd love to have some more champions and supporters so we can grow.
Yeah. Be a champion of this work. It's you have to get on a moving train whenever you can. Bree, how can we help you? How can we support you, lift you up?
Yeah. So someone asked, what's your website? And Cedric, I don't know if you shared your website. Do you want to put that in there right now. The projectdestin.com.
Projectdestin.com. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And so mine is parityhomes.com, PARITY homes.com, and also on Instagram. So you can find me there. But there's a lot of different ways that you can help. And I would say, like, I'm a huge collaborator. I love to collaborate on things. So the first is that if you live in Baltimore and if you're from Baltimore, you want to own a home, join us. Right now we have 20 pre-qualified, pre-approved home buyers for our 96 homes, but that means we have another 76 homes, that we'll need to fill. So if, you live in Baltimore and you believe in equitably co-investing in neighborhoods together in a way that's non-displacing, join us. Reach out. You can email me at bree@parityhomes.com. And also on the website, there is like a join newsletter function, and you can let me know like what you want me to contact you about. The other is I really believe in holistic community rebuilding. So I see someone ask, like, if I'm a musician, how can I contribute to the real estate transformation wave? So like part of what Parity is going to be launching over the next year or so is the inclusion of arts into how we, rebuild community. So if you're an artist, reach out. If you run a, organization that organizes cleanups, reach out. Pretty much reach out for anything. And I'm sure that we can find some way to work together. Another big area that I'm interested in is urban gardening and urban farming. So if you're a farmer, let's talk about, how we can grow some fresh food in the community. If you are an anti-recidivism organization that works with formerly incarcerated people, reach out, because we're always looking to be hiring, formerly incarcerated people. So there's just a lot of different ways. So reach out. And then also we're in the process of getting our nonprofit up and running. So if you want to donate, that would be great. If you are an investor, that would be great. I think that's it. And then maybe like a total aside is that entrepreneurship is really hard. So just like checking in and saying like, hey, I'm thinking about you. I'm sending you good energy. Keep going. That actually, really helps. There's been many a times where I've been like right on the verge of like, I can't do this. And then I get like a text message like, you can do it. And I'm like, okay, you're right. I can do it. So
you know what, that's an important point, because entrepreneurship and that, I didn't ask this, and we've heard this over and over. It's a lonely exercise at certain points. So it's important that we lift you all up and that we champion you, that we make those text messages and send those uplifting thoughts just to keep you all motivated and going. We put the website, so I've gotten that a couple times. I got it a couple of times, Cedric, I need to take you to Mervo. So expand into my old high school. I am remiss. I know the folks on here talking about me because I haven't taken you to Mervo, but that will happen. Don't worry, that will happen this year. Let me close out and let me ask this question. We got so many questions in, but I think we're going to get the close on this one. What's been your greatest accomplishment thus far, and how can we support you in just making more of those accomplishments happen?
Bree, you want to know?
I'm gonna let you take that one, Cedric.
Hey, I'm raised by a single mom. So, I bought my mom a house when I was 25 after a bonus. That will always be my biggest accomplishment. But for me, like, not that I don't appreciate the success I've had so far, but I think part of what has made me successful is that I'm just so hungry, and I've got a chip on my shoulder about being more successful. So I really don't have time to think about the success, but every time we launch in a new city or in a new community, like we're getting ready to gear up and we're launching with UNC in Durham, North Carolina. And it's the fact that we get a call, in May, and then by September we're launching. I'm always just extraordinarily proud of the fact that over the last 4 years, we've built a platform that can scale quickly. So what I'm probably most proud of is our ability to respond to opportunity quickly and with similar quality. So that's probably the thing I'm most proud of is our ability to do that.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Bree, how about you?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this, and I would say that I'm really proud that I've stuck with this. You know, like we just said, entrepreneurship is so hard, and there have been a lot of like really low points for me over the last few years. But the fact that I've stuck with it, and you know, all my friends have kind of reminded me, and my family has reminded me that it's not about the end destination. It's really about the journey, and the fact that you had the courage to even set out on this journey, and the fact that, you know, while you're on this journey, you're actually impacting people in the process. It's not just about, you know, the tangible, oh, you built a house. It's, you had the audacity to dream, and in doing so, you've actually inspired others. So I think for me, like, that is what is my biggest accomplishment, where even if I didn't get to the end point, I'm proud that I even started.
Well, let me say this. First of all, we want to say, just from all the folks on here, just thank you both for having the courage, which is, I call courage just fear that said its prayers, right? And so in that way, just thank you both for being courageous, and also being courageous for our community and caring deeply about them, so that as you are successful, we succeed alongside you. And I know Bree and Cedric, you know, you said, you know, you need people to cheer you on in those moments when you're like, why am I still doing this? Know that we are cheering for you, but we're going to be much more explicit about that. And that's why in many ways, we so enjoy having this, celebrating entrepreneurs that are doing such great work. So first of all, let me just say thank you to both of you. If I get everybody in the chat just to put your hands, give you a five and a thank you for that. You have been both phenomenal today, and we just appreciate all you're doing. Let me give people your information because people keep asking. So you can follow Bree as well as Cedric on social media at Parity Homes. So Bree is at Parity Homes, and Cedric's at Project Destined, all one word, as well as their websites, which you've received before. They say, keep going, Bree and Cedric, you're courageous, smart, and strong. So that I agree with them. Next week, we're going to have 2 additional entrepreneurs. Next week is going to be all about flowers. So we have 2 florists. One, Baltimore Blossom. She has been in business 30 years. And Florida Ave, which is an up and coming business, but actually told us about Baltimore Blossoms. She said that's someone who encourages her and motivates her to stay in the business. So we're going to be talking about everything flowers. Please, people, follow us on @JHConnects on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also email us your feedback to jhconnects@jhu.edu. I want to thank our partners, Johns Hopkins University, Johns Hopkins Health System, Hopkins Local, the Mayor's Office of Small Minority and Women-Owned Business, and the Warnock Foundation. With that, I just want to say thank you, Bree and Cedric. Keep
Thank you
doing the good work, and we really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, thank you for giving us.
Thank you, Alicia. This was great.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Yeah, and Cedric, it was great to meet you.
Great to meet you as well. We'll do some business together, I'm sure. All right.
Yes.
No, seriously, I'm gonna call you right after this.
Oh, see, we're always making these connections. Great.